Negative gearing backfires. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I have a stein of coffee and I thought we'd have a look at this article from Domain regarding negative gearing and how, well, it's backfiring for some people. Now, I have mixed opinions of negative gearing. I am a fan of any method of reducing taxation. I think, well, I don't agree with taxation in many ways. It's forced labor to the state, fundamentally, if you think about it. You've got to work so many hours and days and months of the year to the government, one way or another. If everything that was a tax was actually labeled tax, and you saw it, people would be a little angrier. Now, negative gearing, it's a great way, an incentive to encourage people to invest in the property sector, and apparently it's meant to give lower rents. The idea is you essentially make a loss on this investment so you can write it off your tax bill from other sources of income. It's what a lot of people have been doing to reduce their tax bill in a normal job. A lot of mums, dads, teachers, normal people. Even the mechanic who came to repair or assess my car, he had 3 or 4 properties. So a lot of people have been doing it. Now, the issue with that is it results in, well, housing affordability going out the window because everyone is investing it, and an incentive to buy property. It pushes up the price. So if we were to, even suggest changes to negative gearing, maybe cap the amount of loss you can make on a property, or only offset the loss to the cost of the property or to the revenue of the property, the expenses of the property, not other income, people will come up in arms going, well, then rents will go up. Another thing, the pressure for these properties may go down. They may not be as attractive. People will be forced to sell. Property prices will go down. Maybe less people will need to rent. Because another issue, this is an intervention in the market. It is pushing money away from other investments into property. Over 50% of the wealth of our civilization is tied up in property. That's money that could have been into small business. They could have gone into manufacturing. They could have gone into someone doing a startup. They could have been invested in a wealth of other things. But it's been put in there. I remember when I was doing my stint working in the Architectural Practice Academy, and there were, senior architects working for the Department of Public Works here in Queensland. And these were experienced people, and they enjoyed their government job because it wasn't as stressful as the private sector. The pay was dependable. The banks loved them because they were always going to get paid. So they would just buy one property after another property as well on the side to flip it. I mean, good on them for doing it. But in some ways, it's the easy entrepreneur. The risk, there is a risk, say the government intervenes in the market significantly and allows people to get out of rent. But there's a flip side to it. There's 2 sides to it. It's turning us from an innovative civilization, an Australia back in the day that was on the edge of the world, that built the first cast iron tank, was leaders in the space race, to now we're a quarry with a primitive economy. Talk to anyone who's in manufacturing, anyone who has to deal with staff and regulation. If you have the choice between that and just flipping houses, well, you can see why we've ended up where we have. So that's where we come to this article. So why negatively geared landlords are going to struggle the most with reducing rents for tenants. Because, you're set up to actually make a loss. That's the thing, particularly if you've been hit on your property and you've been hit on your job. It's going to be tough. Just think about this. This is creating a perverse environment where we're encouraging people to lose money. Well, that's what happens when you intervene in the market. Most landlords are already losing money on their investments, which may explain their hesitance to cut rents for struggling tenants, experts say. Well, yeah, and you can appreciate that. There are going to be a lot of them out there that have built up one property on the back of another property on the back of the capital gains of another property, and they're leveraged to the hilt. Landlords who own a negatively geared property where the rental income is not enough to cover the associated costs of owning the property, such as home loan repayments, have to personally make up the shortfall. At tax time, the amount the landlord has lost is deducted from their income tax bill, often delivering them a windfall by way of a tax return. Tax return. I mean, I hate the term tax return. It means you've overpaid your tax. This is why I really don't like pay-as-you-go. PAYG. That means the boss, your employer, is paying your tax for you. People don't realize how much tax they actually pay. And they think the money they get, they get money taken off them, their money, and then they get a little bit of it back at the end because they've overpaid it and they're happy. It just shows a lack of understanding of it. But we've been conditioned in the environment we are, and a lot of people can't be bothered thinking about it. AMP Capital economist Shane Oliver said, financially, it makes it more difficult for the landlord. They will be more vulnerable to rent reductions than landlords who aren't negatively geared. Since the shutdown of non-essential industries and the restriction of movement due to the illness outbreak, a potential rental crisis has emerged. Now, we don't have any investment properties, and I haven't rented for years. The last property Rachel and I rented was a little two-bedroom place, a little two-bedroom old Queenslander across the road from Finlayson's in Kangaroo Point. And so we had 4 lanes of 4 lanes of traffic next to us on Wellington Road there. There was a pub. Pineapple Hotel wasn't too far away, so it was convenient. While we were studying at uni, it was fantastic. Then we started up our first business. We got married. We stayed there for a good 6-7 years. When we had Mina, that's when we decided, okay, we need to go somewhere else. I'd like to get something ourselves or move somewhere else because you don't want to be near that much traffic. I think we were paying $420 a week then for this little 2-bedroom place. We'd converted the little front entry into our bedroom and rented out the other 2 rooms to get more people. We'd turned the main living area into an office. So let's just say I maximized my utility from that property. That's what you got to do, guys. That's what you got to do. And the office was for my business. I wasn't renting it out to a third party. Although maybe you could. But the thing is, I was speaking to a relative who has an investment property down the Gold Coast, and they were, a little 3-bedroom brick veneer specky with a double garage. Nice little place, tiny backyard. They were renting it for $570 a week to people. So I'm a bit removed from the cost of actual rental properties now. So I'm going to Rachel, how can anyone ever even hope to build up enough to get a deposit if they're paying that much rent? But there are cheaper options out there now. But the thing is, if people are getting good rent and they're still negative gearing it, which our family member wasn't, but if people are still negative gearing it at such high rents, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And this is the thing, guys. It's a bubble. It's where all this money has gone. It's been into property, and this has pushed it there. There should have been a cap on it. Because I know Labor wanted to pretty much get rid of it or amend it. And the thing is, that means future generations aren't going to get the opportunity to take advantage of this scheme. So all the boomers, they took advantage of it, build up a portfolio. Oh, no, now you don't get it anymore. All the younger ones. In a way, that doesn't seem fair either, does it? So there needs to be a phasing away of negative gearing, I would say, or reduction in the capacity for people to use it to ensure our civilization doesn't put all our eggs in one basket in property, which we've done. Renters more likely to be on lower income and employed in the industries first hit by the shutdown, such as hospitality, the arts, and tourism, became concerned about how they'd pay rent, and landlords became concerned about how they'd manage repayments, interest, and insurance without rents coming in. The Australian Taxation Office data from 1617 showed 58% of investment properties were negatively geared. 58%. Even with the impending tax rebate, Camberwell landlord Josh Hartwig would struggle to accommodate a rent decrease if his tenants needed it. So then he's too close to the wire then, isn't he? If the tenant stays in there, I can continue as long as I'm at least working, he said. But it is going to cost me $150 a week to keep the place with the tenant in there. Mr. Hartwig's loan was recently switched from interest only to principal and interest, increasing his costs. His partner also recently had to close her Pilates studio and was on reduced income. Well, here's the thing, guys. I mean, I feel so I don't feel sorry for him at all. If anything, I think it's a bit ludicrous. I mean, going from interest only to principal and interest. I mean, okay, you know, these interest only loans, they're not forever. They're only for a particular period, and you're at the bank's whim. You're at the bank's whim. It's that simple. You know, if you can't afford it, sell. No one's holding a gun to your head. Or maybe cut your costs. It's only $150 a week. You can find that. You know? He said he'd need help from the banks to be able to afford it, otherwise he may lose the investment. What do you reckon, guys? What do you think? I know there are a lot of you out there, a lot of you that have made good money using investment properties, using negative gearing. But what do you think about this situation? Does this tell you he's stretched too far? If he can't cover it with interest and principal? Mr. Hartwig was rent vesting and had already been trying to sell the unit since February with a little luck. Okay, so he's already in the hole. So they picked someone who's a bad example. If the tenants are at the bottom rung and we're in the middle and the banks are at the top, we need all the help we can get from the top, he said. We're coping at the moment, and we'll see what happens in a couple of months. Cindy landlord Michelle Matthews has reduced her Northern Beaches tenants' rent because they worked in the tourism industry and had lost a lot of business. The property isn't negatively geared, but will be now cash flow negative. The rent used to cover their mother's nursing home care, but now no longer does. Then sell the property. To make up the difference, Miss Matthews and her brothers have decided to dip into her mother's savings to make I don't feel sorry for this family at all. That's part of life. Our first decision was that we can take the reduction. Mum's estate can take a hit, she said, because he's a good tenant and because the situation is bad and none of us want to be out on the street with our families right now. We're lucky we don't have to choose between a family going onto the street and our mother's care. Miss Matthews was renting herself and wasn't sure her landlord would offer her a decrease if she needed it. If it was my landlord, I'd get my ass kicked, she said. For me personally, and this wasn't the case for my brothers, and you can't just dehumanize tenants in this kind of way. Well, I mean, that's good on them for taking care of their tenant, because hopefully that loyalty will be repaid if they're taking care of your property. But I mean, these are just the breaks here. I don't see it such bad a situation. Do you guys? I mean, come on. But experts argue landlords who negatively gear are usually richer and are in a better position to take the financial hit. Because these arrangements could usually be intentional, these landlords should be prepared to take a hit in their rental income, Domain economist Trent Wilshire said. Well, wouldn't you be able to write more off then? Wouldn't you be able to claim a greater loss? Then you can carry it on to the next year. I'm an architect, not an accountant, so don't take my word on that, but maybe someone can correct me. Isn't that the whole point of this, is to lose money? Fundamentally, to write off your tax? People that negatively gear properties are not using the rental income as an income support as such, he said. Mostly these people have deliberately set up their arrangements so they can reduce the amount of income tax they pay. Landlords who negatively gear are typically high income earners. They probably have higher savings, so they should be able to deal with the rent reduction. But that's on average, and not everyone's like that. City Futures Research Centre research fellow Chris Martin said there was a source of conflict between the two groups. The situation appears acrimonious because a relatively well-resourced group in society is by and large demanding that a much more precarious group continue to pay rent out of the latter's much reduced income, he said. But as the illness crisis deepens, situations where negatively geared landlords might be able to easily afford to take a rent reduction would dry up as the economic crisis affects other industries, Mr. Wiltshire says. For landlords who have lost their jobs or had their incomes reduced, then that rental loss may then become a problem, so any further rent reduction would be tough and they wouldn't be able to reduce their rents, he said. They'll have to weigh up if no rent is better than less rent. Exactly. There'll be a lot of vacancies and not enough people to fill those vacancies. And then you have property getting onto the market, you have a reduction in property prices, and maybe some people who are renting could afford it. We really need reform to this sector, guys. The more and more that I'm looking at it, the more and more our civilization is just obsessed with property. We are too much in love with property as a way of growing wealth. In some ways, it's a Ponzi scheme pushed up by population growth, where we've got immigration just driving up, but our GDP, our per capita growth is going down. Our infrastructure is getting more and more. We're running out of jobs. We're running out of anything other than property. There would be some people who run this as a business with multiple properties negatively geared, he said. They might find themselves in a position where they can't make the repayments, but most landlords should be able to fare okay. Mr. Wiltshire said the land tax concessions offered probably wouldn't be enough to offset the costs incurred by landlords taking a rent decrease, even if they had deferred their mortgage. But not all landlords pay land tax, so it's limited, he said. There's minimum thresholds of what your property has got to be worth. For apartments and units, a lot would fall under the threshold. Mr. Oliver said the mortgage relief schemes offered through lenders would also provide relief, even though the landlord may end up slightly worse financial position. Well, yes, they will be. In the long run, you're worse off if you take a break. At the end of the 6-month period, they still have to make those payments, and it will extend the life of the loan, he said. But it's not comparable to the financial plight of the tenant who might end up homeless. Oh, well, there's other options to rent. But here's one thing. Let's go back to this guy. Let's go back to our friend here, who may not be able to cover rent because he's now switched to interest only to principal. And I'll just bring up a chart, just the chart here to show you. Look at the cash rate, guys. Look at the cash rate. I left a comment on the community tab of the YouTube. I rang up my bank, I'm with CBA, and I waited for about 45 minutes to get a reduction on my interest rate. I said, I'm not happy, cash rate's so low, I want a deal. And they came back with a 0.04% reduction. And I said, thank you very much. I mean, I took it because I'm sitting on the phone with the earpiece in while I'm working, so it doesn't really matter. I tend to do it every couple of weeks, or not every couple of weeks, every month or quarter. End of the year, after tax time, I'll talk to a broker and see if I can get one of those nice deals. But right now, what that brought home to me was how cheap money is right now. It is insanely cheap to borrow. These costs, borrowing costs are nothing. That saving over a year is not much for me, but still, bloody hell, every bit helps. Better in my pocket than the bank's. So guys, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see any reform to negative gearing? Or do you think it's just too much of a poison chalice until this boomer generation starts moving on? You're going to have the younger people wanting reform. What would you do to address the housing affordability? What strategies would you put in place? Do you think scaling back negative gearing, limiting its deployment, opening up more land to allow people to build and invest? We'll have to see, guys. It's going to be interesting. But, bloody hell, if you brought it to the wall now, where you switched from interest only to principal and interest, with interest rates at nothing, you're cutting it bloody close. And there are probably going to be a lot of people that are cutting it close already. As always, please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and you want to support us, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or on Patreon. You can support us via our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay, or Independent Reserve and Kucoin for the crypto traders. You can buy a merch from Teespring or from the HeiseSays blog. send us gold using Gold Pass, or support us via PayPal. Thanks everyone, have a great day, and enjoy your Sunday.